FIFA spent years and an enormous fortune creating a system that was meant to end football's biggest arguments forever. No more robbed teams. No more hand of God moments. No more obvious injustice slipping past a referee's eyes. Only cold, precise technological truth. Yet here is the twist nobody in Zurich ever expected. The result that has become FIFA's greatest nightmare. That very system has now sparked more anger, more heartbreak, and more accusations of outright cheating than any human referee in the sport's history. The true villain of this World Cup is not a person, but a system. Let's examine how VAR, the technology designed to rescue football from endless controversy, became the biggest controversy of them all. To understand how badly everything went wrong, you first have to remember what VAR was actually created to do. When it arrived around 9 years ago, its mission was simple and honorable. Correct only the clear and obvious mistakes, the game-changing decisions, the moments referees simply could not see. It was born from injustices like Diego Maradona punching the ball into England's net in 1986 and escaping punishment. Mark Geiger, one of the referees who helped introduce VAR, summed up its founding principle in 5 unforgettable words: minimum interference, maximum benefit. Remember that phrase because it now haunts this entire tournament. VAR was never supposed to re-referee football. It was meant to be a quiet safety net, stepping in only when disaster struck. The real question, Geiger explained, was never, is the referee correct? Instead, it was, is the referee clearly and obviously wrong? Now look at what the system has become. For this World Cup, FIFA did not reduce VAR's involvement. They expanded it dramatically. Refereeing chief Pierluigi Collina, working alongside the lawmakers, deliberately widened the system by adding 4 completely new situations where video officials could intervene. The results have been astonishing. There were roughly 20 VAR interventions throughout the entire 2018 World Cup and fewer than 30 during Qatar 2022. This tournament raced beyond 100 interventions before the quarterfinals had even started. That equals roughly 1 overturned decision every 2 matches, a higher rate than the previous World Cup and even greater than an entire season of top-flight club football. Red cards more than tripled compared with both 2018 and 2022. The safety net did not simply become larger, it consumed the game itself. Minimum interference turned into maximum interference. And the promised benefit, that is exactly where everything begins to collapse. The problem is not only how frequently VAR intervenes, but what those interventions do to the experience of watching football. The game's greatest magic is its momentum. The explosion of a goal, the roar of the crowd, the emotional release. VAR interrupts that magic completely. Croatia's disallowed goal required more than 2.5 minutes before being overturned. 2.5 minutes of an entire nation celebrating before everything was suddenly ripped away. Throughout this tournament, the same frustrating ritual repeated itself. Players stood around the pitch, exhausted and waiting, while the referee jogged to a small screen and disappeared into endless replays. Nobody knew whether to celebrate or defend. The crowd had no idea whether to keep singing or quietly sit back down. The emotional rhythm that makes football so thrilling was switched off and back on like a faulty light. FIFA, meanwhile, has shown little regret. Collina publicly defended the tournament's most controversial decisions, insisting there is no defined limit on how far back officials can review play before canceling a goal. According to him, a foul remains a foul, no matter how slight or invisible it appears. That response shows FIFA looking directly at the damage and deciding the machine is operating exactly as intended, which, in many ways, is the heart of the problem. Because this so-called microscopic perfection has produced moments like Croatia versus Portugal in the round of 32. Deep into stoppage time, with the final kick of their tournament, Croatia somehow scored one of the most unbelievable equalizers imaginable. A chaotic goal that sent an entire nation into absolute celebration. Then, more than 2 minutes later, a screen erased it completely. Not because of a reckless tackle, not because of a shove, but because as the ball traveled through the air, it barely grazed the hair of a Croatian player, leaving a teammate offside by the smallest imaginable margin. No human eye could have spotted it. The ball showed no visible deflection, yet a sensor hidden inside it detected the slightest contact, and that was enough. Croatia were eliminated, and Luka Modric's remarkable 24-year international career came to an end. Not because they were beaten outright, but because a computer detected what amounted to a single strand of hair. Modric, one of football's greatest legends, did not stay silent. He argued that VAR is either being used incorrectly or applied selectively depending on the stature of the team involved. Croatia's own football federation went even further, formally writing to FIFA and calling its use of the technology an outright abuse. Think about what that really means. A national federation that once supported VAR accusing FIFA of abusing the very technology it promoted. And Croatia are far from the only example. They are simply the most heartbreaking chapter in a much longer story. Iran had 3 different goals ruled out by VAR, including one where a striker was offside by nothing more than the tip of a toe, costing them a place in the knockout rounds. Senegal's World Cup ended after a late VAR penalty was awarded for the slightest possible contact. Egypt, leading by 2 goals and dreaming of history, saw a brilliant goal cancelled because of a foul committed almost 100 yards away from the ball. Minutes later, a penalty appeal at the opposite end was ignored before Argentina scored the winner. Egypt's coach, Hossam Hassan, summed up the frustration in simple words, saying what was happening simply was not fair. Switzerland then watched Briel Embolo receive a red card in the quarterfinal after VAR upgraded an incident involving an Argentine player, turning what had been a yellow card into a dismissal for the Swiss striker. The decision became so confusing that even the BBC's own rules expert questioned whether it actually qualified under the mistaken identity rule that justified the review. Swiss defender Manuel Akanji stood close to tears afterward, admitting he had never experienced such a one-sided match. Again and again, the same painful sequence unfolded. Pure celebration, then the referee jogging toward the monitor, followed by heartbreak as another moment of joy disappeared because someone was studying a television screen. And it is not only goals being erased. Players are also being sent off at an unprecedented rate. Red cards at this World Cup more than tripled compared with both 2018 and 2022, with 13 already shown before the quarterfinals even began. At least 2 of those, including Folarin Balogun and England defender Jarell Quansah, came after incidents the referee completely missed during live play and punished only after endless slow-motion replays. That reveals one of VAR's biggest flaws. Almost any challenge appears far more violent when every frame is frozen and examined in slow motion. Speed provides context, and VAR often removes that context entirely before asking referees to judge actions that never looked nearly as severe in real time. That leads to an even deeper problem, one that goes beyond any individual result. VAR is slowly squeezing the life out of the very qualities that make football unique. Former FIFA referee Christina Unkel explained it perfectly. Football is an art. It is messy, subjective, emotional, and deeply human. That has always been its beauty. Yet the relentless pursuit of machine-certified perfection is stripping those qualities away, replacing them with toenail offsides and hair follicle debates that almost nobody truly wants. As United States defender Chris Richards joked, if you examine anything under a microscope, you will eventually find something. That is precisely the issue. If every goal, tackle, or corner is inspected with enough forensic detail, some tiny technical infringement will almost always appear. A sport where every magical moment remains uncertain, where no celebration feels safe until a computer gives permission, is slowly losing its soul. One network scientist studying the tournament said it bluntly. Fans are expressing their feelings loudly because they were never asked whether they wanted football to become this way. It was simply imposed upon them, and many openly dislike it. But this is also where the situation becomes genuinely dangerous for FIFA, far beyond simple frustration or boredom. Because VAR is applied so inconsistently from one match to another and from one team to another, it has fueled widespread conspiracy theories. When the system reaches back 100 yards and 30 seconds to erase one team's goal but refuses to review another obvious incident from a different camera angle, supporters stop believing the process is impartial. When it intervenes to send off a Swiss player barely 4 minutes after Switzerland equalized against Argentina, huge sections of the internet immediately become convinced the outcome is predetermined. That reaction is not merely imagination. It is the direct consequence of a system whose decisions nobody can consistently predict. Modric's warning about treatment depending on the size of the team has now become one of the defining accusations surrounding this tournament. Egypt submitted a formal complaint. England manager Thomas Tuchel, hardly someone usually claiming unfair treatment, described the officiating as erratic and unreliable, warning that any referee could eliminate any team at any moment. Even the tournament's biggest controversy, Folarin Balogun's red card, escalated so dramatically that it reportedly drew a phone call from the President of the United States, all because of another VAR decision. A technology introduced to eliminate doubt has instead created more uncertainty than football has ever experienced. Look closely at everything surrounding Argentina because it offers perhaps the clearest example of how VAR destroys trust. Egypt's disallowed goal, Embolo's dismissal, and Lionel Messi avoiding any card for a studs-up challenge against Algeria's captain during the group stage, despite the incident looking remarkably similar to the one that saw Balogun sent off. You can defend each decision individually if you choose. But when you place them together, all leaning the same direction and all involving referees or video reviews, it becomes easy to understand why people began asking what was so special about Argentina. The important point is not whether any conspiracy has ever been proven. The real issue is that a fair, transparent, and consistently applied system would never have allowed those suspicions to grow in the first place. VAR was supposed to remove suspicion from football. Instead, it has become the very engine creating it, match after match, controversy after controversy, until almost every fan base on Earth believes the screen is somehow working against them personally. So now we need to take this conversation seriously and be completely honest, because the easiest reaction is to demand that VAR be abolished, but that would be the wrong conclusion. The uncomfortable reality is that VAR is usually correct. Most of those 100-plus interventions genuinely fixed mistakes. Balogun's challenge really did deserve a red card once it was viewed in slow motion. Croatia's goal really was offside according to the laws of the game. And VAR was introduced because football has suffered from unforgettable injustices. Bruce Arena, who coached the United States during the 2002 World Cup, still speaks about the obvious German handball on the goal line that was never called, a decision that helped eliminate his team from the quarterfinals. Looking back, he admitted that if VAR had existed in 2002, the United States might have reached the semifinals. His argument cuts directly through all the emotion. Why should football not strive to make the correct decisions? It is a fair question. Nobody genuinely wants to return to the days when a blatant handball, a missed offside, or a referee's mistake could decide the outcome of a World Cup. The real problem has never been that VAR gets too many decisions wrong. The problem is that being technically correct and being right for the game have quietly become two completely different things. Arena also pointed out something many people overlook. If anyone wants to talk about interruptions destroying football's rhythm, the 3-minute hydration breaks introduced by FIFA to satisfy television schedules damage the flow of the match far more than most VAR reviews ever do. That is exactly why this has become FIFA's greatest nightmare, and it is a nightmare entirely of its own making. The entire purpose of introducing this technology, the reason Gianni Infantino embraced it so enthusiastically and later expanded its role, was to make the World Cup beyond criticism. The dream was to silence every argument by allowing technology to deliver decisions so precise that nobody could question them. Instead, FIFA accidentally created the tournament's biggest villain. A system that is usually correct yet almost universally disliked. A system capable of ending legendary careers because of a strand of hair and destroying knockout dreams because of a toenail. A system that has convinced one half of football supporters that the game is somehow rigged against them while giving the other half another reason to mock every goal their rivals celebrate. FIFA chased perfection but unintentionally proved that perfection itself may be football's greatest enemy. Because football was never designed to be perfect. It was always meant to be human. Christina Unkel and many other experienced officials believe there is still a solution. Give referees back the authority to examine a technically correct decision and simply say, "No, that goes against the spirit of the game. Play on." Allow common sense to outweigh the computer when necessary. Whether FIFA possesses the humility to embrace that approach is an entirely different question. It is also worth remembering that when FIFA was asked to explain these growing concerns, the organization chose not to respond. 9 years ago, the promise was simple: minimum interference, maximum benefit. This summer delivered the complete opposite. Maximum interference and a tournament where the biggest, loudest, and most repeated story was not an unforgettable goal, a breathtaking save, or a moment of brilliance. Instead, it became a man sitting in a room in Dallas watching endless replays while deciding whether the celebration you just experienced was ever allowed to count. That was never the vision behind VAR, yet it has unmistakably become the reality of modern football. So now the question belongs to every fan watching. Has VAR ruined this World Cup for you, or would you still rather accept the old chaos that came with human error? I honestly find myself torn between both sides. Share your opinion because the semifinals are still ahead, and if recent history has taught us anything, that screen in Dallas is almost certainly not finished shaping this tournament yet.